Hello, and welcome to Principles of Macroeconomics, Module 2.3. Today we'll start our discussion about unemployment. So when we think about the labor market, what we're really looking at is the number of jobs and the number of workers in an economy. When we experience unemployment in the economy, this is due to some kind of mismatch, difference, or shortage of jobs to the number of workers that we have. Today in our discussion, we're going to talk about two types of unemployment that we have, the natural rate of unemployment and the cyclical rate of unemployment. And we'll talk about the differences between those two. To start off with, though, let's talk about labor statistics and how we actually calculate the unemployment rate. So first, what is the labor force? Well, the labor force is the number of employed people, the people that have jobs, and the number of unemployed people, the number which is the people that want jobs but don't have them. The sum of those two is going to be the labor force. Now, it's important to note that the labor force is not the same as the adult population in our economy, because we're looking at specifically people that actually have jobs, the employed people, plus the people that want jobs but don't have them, the unemployed people. So now that we have our labor force, let's calculate the unemployment rate. The unemployment rate is going to be the number of unemployed people divided by the labor force. That's going to give us the percentage of the labor force that want jobs but can't find them. Another measure of the labor market is what we call the labor force participation rate. And this takes the entire labor force of our economy divided by the adult population. And this is going to be persons over the age of 16 that are part of our population. So the labor force participation rate is, again, the labor force divided by the adult population multiplied by 100%. Both the unemployment rate and the labor force participation rate are giving us the percentage of people in our economy that are either unemployed or the percentage of people that are part of the labor force. So let's work through an example here. So as you can see on this table, we have two countries, country A and country B, and we have various statistics for them provided by their labor bureaus. So we want to fill in the gaps. Here you can pause the video, try to work out the table yourself, and then continue with the video and I'll explain the answers. Okay, so what do we have to do first with the information that we have? The first thing is, let's look at country A. We want to be able to calculate the unemployment rate. We have the information that we need to be able to calculate that. We take the number of unemployed people that is reported divided by the labor force, and that is going to give us an unemployment rate of 9.5%. Next, we can calculate the labor force participation rate for country A. We take the labor force, reported again by the Labor Bureau, and divided by the adult population. And this gives us a labor force participation rate in country A of 72%. Okay, so now we can calculate the number of employed people. So we have the number of unemployed people, we have the amount of people in our labor force, right? So we can simply take the difference between those two, and that'll give us the number of employed people. So now for country B, we can calculate the labor force that they have. We take the adult population and multiply it by the labor force participation rate, giving us a labor force of 27,600 people. Okay, now that we have the labor force and we have the number of unemployed people, we're able to calculate the employed people. We take the difference between the 100% of people in the labor force minus the unemployment rate of 8.8%, and that gives us what we can call the employment rate of 91.2%. We multiply 91.2% by the labor force participation, 27,600 people, and that gives us the number of employed people of 25,171. So those calculations are one way that we can discuss what is happening in our labor market. Hopefully you have a better grasp of how to do those calculations now. So there are some limitations to what we see with the unemployment rate number. The first problem is that it doesn't necessarily take into account what we call discouraged workers. These are people that have been trying to find work but can't find it. They give up and they leave the labor force. It doesn't mean that if a job didn't come along, they wouldn't want to take it. Most likely they would want to take a job if it became available, but they've simply given up looking for work. The next problem is that it doesn't take into account the difference between full-time employment and part-time employment. More specifically, there are people that would like to have full-time jobs but are stuck in a part-time position. Next, in some cases, people might misreport their status. And lastly, it cannot account for the difficulties of finding work when you haven't been employed for a long time. We know statistically that the longer that you've been unemployed, it is more difficult for people to find work. So the difficulty or the ease with which a person can find work is not reported in the unemployment numbers and in labor statistics. Thank you for joining me in Module 2.3. We will continue on with unemployment in the next section.